New Zealand is a rather inconspicuous country. Growing up here, I didn't think much of the landscape and the people. It's a pretty normal country. Not much happens here, ever, really. It's pretty boring. The worst that we get is like gang shootouts and ram raids, which is, for international viewers that aren't aware of what ram raids are, it's when you drive a cheap stolen car into a jewelry store or dairy to steal cigarettes and or jewelry. So that's pretty much what we have in New Zealand. There's nothing interesting going on. What makes the local news is like a bird. You know what I mean? Like, not really much happens in New Zealand. And don't get me wrong, the birds are cool here. But for most of my childhood, I thought we lived in a rather inconspicuous, boring country. Until recently, I stumbled upon the New Zealand iceberg. An iceberg charting all paranormal, true crime, UFO, cryptid sort of events found in New Zealand. I got super into this. Within a day, I dove into it and started reading about absolutely everything. And today I want to cover some of the more outstanding and peculiar things I found in that iceberg, because, as it seems now apparent, New Zealand is a much stranger and more bizarre country than I once thought. In the mid-1800s, the Otago Hospital was known for being a more enlightened and progressive mental hospital, taking care of more patients in more holistic and progressive ways than ever before. Although as time went on, it became apparent that there is a very, very deep and dark mistreatment of patients there, which eventually led to the place being shut down. In the mid-1800s, Otago's population skyrocketed as people moved to Otago at the prospect of mining. There was a lot of gold in the area, and people were kind of taking up on that opportunity and moving to the place to mine. And because of this, they built the largest mental hospital at that time, which was able to house 500 people and 50 staff. The building itself was actually initially constructed by the patients who were already living on the Seacliff land. There was a lot of patients that were initially moved there to just already be at a mental hospital, and since they were constructing this new one, they just put them to work and made them build this new hospital, which already seems somewhat dubious on its own. That kind of feels like free labor, but hey. Eventually, as time went on, the building experienced a lot of structural issues, given to the fact that it was built by unskilled people who aren't builders. They're just, patients of a mental hospital, which doesn't necessarily discredit their skill, but they're not trained builders, they don't know what to do, so kind of wasn't the smartest thing ever. In 1889, a new superintendent of the building was put in place, Mr. Frederick Truby. Frederick Truby went on to form the Plunkett Foundation, which helps with babies being born and stuff. They helped me when I was born and everything. However, he was also a eugenicist. He performed very, very unethical experiments on people of colour, and this was mostly kept in secret until later on in the hospital's history. During the early 1900s, rumours of mistreatment started to circulate about beatings, electroshock therapy, and forced lobotomies. And I don't even know if I want to finish this section, because what I've been reading about this is actually really, really disturbing, so I'll keep it as vague as possible. They performed very unethical and illegal desexing surgeries upon many women in the hospital, and kind of just mangled everything. And the hospital really kind of went on for a long time without anything happening. And because these were just kind of rumors. And they would also deny soldiers their pension and any sort of governmental help they have gotten or compensation they've gotten from being soldiers or ex-soldiers, which, soldiers kind of like the big PTSD guys. They have a lot of mental issues because, they're sent to war and everything, and then they come home and get plopped in a hospital and denied their pension from the people at the hospital. Kind of horrible. So there was a huge, huge history of mistreatment at the Otago Hospital, and it wasn't really addressed for a very, very long time. On the evening of December 8th, 1942, a fire broke out in the 5th ward, killing 37 of the 39 patients housed in that ward. This was the greatest loss of life in New Zealand to date at that point. Seriously, it's so concerning how so many early sanitariums would have these insane accusations and these insane rumors of horrible, horrible mistreatment, and then a massive fire in a ward full of people. Most of them died because the rooms were locked from the outside, not the inside. No questions were raised. Really? It's kind of insane. After the fire, very, very minimal improvements and efforts were made to minimize future catastrophes happening. Very, very minimal. Very little was changed, even though it was recommended by many, many people, and firefighters, literally everything, like the whole shebang. Everyone said that something needs to change, and no improvements were made at the hospital. Treatment continued. More and more lobotomies, more electroshocks to therapy, beating more patients for trying to escape. The list goes on. Until in 1973, the place was officially shut down because of the mounting issues that it clearly had. The building was demolished in 1992. However, now it stands as one of the greatest paranormal hotspots in all of history. So many people were tortured and lost their lives and suffered and died with much left behind, much questions unsolved and gone without justice. Many people still believe there are still ghosts, even though the building has been demolished. And there's often ghost tours that are run up there and everything. I'm not sure quite what to believe about the place, but if there was anywhere in New Zealand that would have ghosts, I would say it's there. There's a horrible, horrible, horrible history there, and it wouldn't be surprising if there were ghosts roaming the grounds. All the images I could find of it were super spooky, and apparently, like the wing wall of people died in a fire is just like rampant with ghost activity, which I think is quite interesting. Moving on from such a sad and grim story, which I honestly don't even know if I'll keep in the final card. It's really dark. Anyway, moving on from such a sad and grim story, let's jump into something a bit more lighthearted, which is the Moho Man. Every single culture, pretty much every continent has a Bigfoot, and New Zealand's is the Moho Man. The Moho Man is said to inhabit the Coromandel Moho Ranges and is said to be a very large Bigfoot. Again, this is the Bigfoot thing. We've done this a million times before. Large, hairy. However, this one has very, very long fingernails. He's got fingies, and he's got very, very long arms. Apparently they reach down below his knees. So, somewhat like Bigfoot, kind of like a cousin sort of situation. There are claims that the Moho Man inhabits a cave full of screaming skeletons. Kind of strange, but there are claims that he lives in a cave full of skeletons. I don't know if they're like Skyrim skeletons, where they're like reanimated, or whether or not they're just dead like normal skeletons. However, it's a kind of strange claim. Everyone who cited it has, referred to it being much like a gorilla. Could just be escaped a gorilla. I don't know. However, I think it's kind of interesting that even New Zealand has its own little Bigfoot. Every single continent has one, so I'm glad that we have one too. I felt like we were kind of missing out. I feel like we were kind of missing out on that cool Bigfoot lore. But now we have one, so I'm great to know that. Also, kind of on the note of the Moho Man as well, apparently there's a moose in the Fiordlands. To those who don't know, moose are not native to New Zealand. There are no moose in New Zealand. No meese? Meeses? Moosei? I don't know. There's no moose in New Zealand. And apparently there's one spot in the Fiordlands, which I believe is down south. It's kind of strange. We've also had apparently a black panther in Canterbury.
Tremble before death!
That's something that's really strange about New Zealand. There seems to be a lot of animals that aren't supposed to be here that are here, which could just be like zoos, but I don't think any zoos in New Zealand have black panthers or mooses. So I think it's really peculiar. I think if you wanted to theorize on it, there could be like some sort of rip in the space-time continuum and down south, because they all seem to be happening and on the South Island. Could be some sort of rip and tear in this rip and tear. Doom. There could be some sort of rip or tear in the space-time continuum, allowing all of these different animals to bleed through into New Zealand. Who knows? I sure don't. I'm just talking shit here. I'm hypothesizing. There's one last story that I want to comment on before we move down to the next tier of the iceberg, and that's Puta Pairehe. Puta Pairehe are kind of like, I guess, fays or fairies for New Zealand. They're these fair-skinned little like goblin creature things, and they live in the woods. There's been a lot of different illustrations and kind of depictions of them in the years, but they live deep in the woods through mountain ranges and everything, and they're kind of just like fairies. They're supposed to be like quite hostile spirits, and they play little music on their flutes, which sounds really fun, but they're very spooky from what I've heard. And apparently they can draw mist to them to disguise them because sunlight is deadly to them. And, I don't usually lend too much credence to the idea of fays or fairies, but I've definitely been hiking in New Zealand and felt kind of unease. And you're looking back on it, it was usually when it's foggy, which might just be that sort of human instinct thing where we conflate our own instincts for danger with something actually being there. But there's definitely been times where I've been walking at the top of my hill. There's a big like hike at the top of my the hills around where I live, and there's definitely been times where I've been hiking and I've turned around and be like, let's leave. I'm not feeling it, I'm not feeling it today. And I really am not crossing out the idea that it could be Putapaira here. I don't want to really discard that because, they're really, really big in Māori folklore, and I don't kind of want to just cast that aside because much like a lot of indigenous myths and legends, I really don't like to just discard them and discredit them immediately. I usually do somewhat consider them, especially when I have felt so very spooked. I'm being serious. I've felt very, very, very spooked sometimes while hiking at the top of my hill. When you're just walking outside and you turn around and you're like, I'm not supposed to be here. Like, there's just this feeling in the air that you're not supposed to be here, or that something doesn't want you here. Not quite that you're in danger, and not quite like you're being watched, but just a feeling that where you are isn't where you're supposed to be. You know what I mean? And I've definitely felt that while I've been out hiking, and I really don't want to cross off the idea that there might be Putapaira here up in those hills. Also, it's kind of just fucking cool. It's kind of a cool idea, right? Either way. Now we will move on to the second tier of the iceberg, going even deeper into New Zealand's paranormal and cryptozoology. The Masterton monster is a creature that was catalogued in the Coomera Times in June of 1883. The article reads as such. A Wairarapa paper says that some residents of Masterton, while shooting early in the week, were astonished at noticing a strange-looking animal, quite different to anything they had ever seen in a museum. One of them was so horrified and alarmed that he had his hands and arms torn among the bush lawyers, and the other stood trembling behind a tree with his gun loaded when he should have been using it. They describe it to be about the size of a dog, with short legs, long hair, curled at the ends, large eyes and jaws, and a broad muzzle. The dogs pursued it, but one returned nearly flayed alive, and the others would hunt no longer. A Māori person hearing the animal described at once declared it to be a taniwha, a sacred animal of amphibious habitats, in which the spirit of the rivers and waters is said to reside. So supposedly there was a taniwha in Masterton. I'm not entirely sure if taniwha were ever written about as having hair, and I'm not entirely sure what this could actually be. Could be a dog, could just be a big dog, but I'm really not sure. It's a really curious case. I find it hard to believe it was a dog. I feel like you wouldn't cower in fear if you had a rifle pointed at a dog, you know what I'm saying? And the fact that it completely flayed another dog, kind of concerning. A lot of strange stuff happens like this in New Zealand, you know what I mean? Where it's like, it's not that interesting, but that's kind of what makes it interesting. It's just like a strange one-off little tale, which is very bizarre, and I appreciate that. In 2012, sightings of a grey lady, a ghost, started being perpetuated around Otago. A specific college in Otago started reporting various sightings of a black figure haunting their hallways. Apparently a pitch black creature peeking around doors and looking at people at the end of their beds when they sleep. This is kind of scary. This is kind of scary bones. That sort of stuff freaks me out big time, man. I don't know. What's the thing called? What are they called? They're called like peekaboos or like hideaways or like... They're little creatures that like pull one of these maneuvers around like a corner of a tree, and they're supposedly like black figures that like watch people at night and stuff. And apparently like if you look at them, they just go away. But that's kind of fucking terrifying. That's absolutely, that scares the balls off me, man. But apparently there was a bunch of sightings of these sort of things at this college in Otago. Apparently repeatedly students would like play pranks on each other about it, until it got to the point that every single one of them had seen this figure at one point, either following them back to their dorm room after studying or at the end of their bed at night, which, that kind of scares the balls off me. And boy, oh boy, am I thankful I was not studying in Otago in 2012, because I never have studied in Otago, but I just don't want to be away from all of that, This story comes from a bit further down in the iceberg. We're starting to really heat up. We have the Hanging Witches of Auckland. There is a particular park in Auckland at which there have been reports of inhuman, but also kind of human, howls and cackles and screams in the night. And for keen-eyed people who happen to turn their cars off, they seem to see 3 witches or females in some sort of dress dancing around up in the trees. This rumour became so heavily perpetuated that people actually started digging into it, and they found that not far from that park, in the general area, 3 women had been hung for crimes of witchery or witchcraft or whatever. If you suffocate to death in this river, you are not a witch. Oh shit, I guess she wasn't a witch. Crazy. So 3 women were tried for witchcraft and killed and hung in this park years and years ago. Now that I've established the kind of story, there are 3 testimonials I would like to read out about the witches. My mother told me about the 3 witches hanging from a tree nearby the 3 Muses. She discovered around the age of 14 too. She took me there when I was 14, and that was one freaky night. We saw a very faint apparition of 3 women hanging from their necks. I just remember their feet not touching the ground. The strange thing I noticed is the ragged nature of the clothing the women were wearing while hanging from the tree. It's an uneasy feeling being down there in the evening. I have gone down there during the daytime to investigate the tree I saw the 3 women hanging from. I recently read your article about the 3 witches in Auckland Domain and realised that I have had some sort of similar experience to other people. I used to longboard through the Domain last year. There is a path that is now closed off from cars that we skated down once. Me and my friend were skating down and he fell off his board. He told me he felt as if someone grabbed him and pushed him off his board. The path was also very cold, even though it was the middle of summer. After that, I felt as if someone was watching us, so we left instantly. Me and my friend continued skating other hills of the Domain and never thought about that path ever again. Now I feel as if it were one of the witches that were there with us and pushed my friend off his board. If you ever find yourself around the halfway bush area of Dunedin, you might just be unfortunate enough to stumble across a short but menacing upright standing dog creature, with glowing animal eyes scurrying around and making a hissing sound through the bush watching passers-by. This is the Dunedin Dogman. He is a dogman-like creature known to leap out at people in Dunedin. What's going on in Dunedin, man? We've got that ghost lady, we've got the hospital, we've got the dog man. What's going on in Dunedin, I swear. Either way, Dunedin has a dog man, which I think is kind of cool. I love the dog man. It's you know my love for werewolves. This is well established for me. I love werewolves, and it's just super cool to see that we have a dog man in New Zealand. I was really excited to hear about that. But apparently he's just harassed a bunch of people. Apparently it's the story. Apparently people will walk through Dunedin in certain parks and more densely forested areas, and the dog man will leap out at them and be like, "Bleh," and then they'll run away. That's been pretty much every single recounting and story of it. The Goat Man of Desert Road has been spotted all throughout history in New Zealand and kind of everywhere in New Zealand. Even though he's known as the Goat Man of Desert Road, apparently he just kind of hitchhikes through New Zealand, and he is both to be seen as a good and a bad omen, kind of like Mothman in a weird way. You stop and give him a lift, but just a short way up the road he asks to get out. Sometimes he just disappears from the car, having safely gotten you past the stretch of road you were about to have an accident on. Just seeing him on a dangerous piece of road has avoided you from an accident about to happen, most probably right where he stood. As you would imagine with a goat man, he's apparently quite short, hairy, and smelly. And there's actually, in the article I'm reading here, there's a really funny bit at the end here that I want to read out. Sometimes you don't even know that he's a goat until he gets out of your car when you hear the clopping of hooves fading into the distance. Meet a conspiracy. The goat man is just a Dutch man. He's very tall and smelly, and his feet go clop clop because he's wearing clogs. I just thought that was quite funny. Oh, I fucking love this website. I love Kiwis. Like, we can't even talk about bloody conspiracy theories and cryptids without making some sort of like joke about the Dutch people. So anyway, that's the video. I kind of wanted to talk about this stuff because it had been kind of on my mind for a while now, and I'm totally down to go deeper into the iceberg at some point if you guys want me to. Sorry if it's kind of short and boring. I just kind of wanted to talk about it, and I didn't know what else to make for this week, honestly. So I hope you like this on its own. I hope you like it. I hope it's chill. But anyway, I'll catch you all in the next one. Hope you enjoyed. Peace, guys.